of Worship, your source for commentary and discussion on worship, theology, and culture. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones. Hello and welcome to the Act of Worship podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones. Great to be here today, continuing the Psalm project. We are plowing through this, and we are here today at Psalm 54. Psalm 54, the title here specifically says, to the choir master with stringed instruments, a maskil of David, when the Ziphites went and told Saul, "Is not David hiding among us?" And so this historical title locates the inspiration of this psalm in David's pre-monarchical days. He wrote the psalm after being betrayed by the Ziphites, who were loyal to Saul. And you can read these accounts in 1 Samuel 23 and 1 Samuel 26. They they were loyal to Saul, and they told Saul about it. And so David wrote this psalm in response to this event that occurred where he was betrayed by them. And it's kind of amazing to read this text, realizing that thousands of years ago, that this text that you are reading today was actually what David wrote. The historical King David, King of Israel, wrote this text in response to something that happened in his life, and we have the privilege of reading it today. I will not, even though it is a short psalm, read the text because this is one that is going to be read during the musical setting. It is one where I have set a refrain and then divided the psalm into two and read the entire psalm. And it's very short. I am going to keep my commentary short, just a few minutes, if even that. And so you can see this. This really is a psalm of praise to God, or a psalm of confidence, I should say, because it was written during a time when David's life was in danger. And yet, if you read the psalms that David wrote when that happened, when his life was in danger, when maybe he was depressed, when things were not so good for him. Often he writes these psalms and reflects that in the psalm text, but always ends up praising God and showing confidence in him. In fact, the psalm ends with, "For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies." And that idea is what I took to set the refrain. So he begins at the very beginning of the psalm by saying, "God, save me by your name and vindicate me by your might." Vindicate me. The word identifies his complaint as a judicial one. David had been unjustly betrayed by the Ziphites and his countrymen from Judah. And then he says in verse 3, "Strangers have risen against me." Though they are countrymen, he doesn't know them personally. So this is what he means by strangers. And then he ends, there's only 7 verses in this psalm. He ends it in verses 6 and 7. He says, "With a free will offering I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies." This is a vow to sacrifice to the Lord as a thank you for being rescued from trouble. And we see this often in the Psalms. And this is really how our prayer life should be. Where, yes, we acknowledge that things might not be so good, that people rise against us, whatever the case may be, but ultimately regain that focus on the Lord and the certainty of his victory in the midst of his people. So it's a very short psalm. It is written as a refrain with red text juxtaposed throughout this setting. And so I hope you enjoy this and worship through this. Here is Psalm 54. Thank you for listening today to the Act of Worship podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones.
O God, save me by your name, and vindicate me by your might. O God, hear my prayer. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me. Ruthless men seek my life. They do not set God before themselves.
Behold our God, who is my help. He is the holder of my life, for he has delivered me from every trouble in victory.
Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. He will return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put an end to them. With a free will offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies.
Behold our God, who is my help. He is the holder of my life, for he has delivered me from every trouble in victory. Behold our God, who is my help. He is the holder